that after me. Everything I need is in Jesus. If you believe it, you will say it with all confidence. Everything I need is in Jesus. It's in you, Lord. Everything we need is in you. All in you. It's in you, Lord. Everything we need is in you. All in you.
Well, my grace, you're my melody, you're my ransom, my salvation. You are my Lord, every time of need, because of your love, I believe. You are my grace, you are my melody, you are my ransom, my salvation. You are my Lord, every time of need, because of your love, I believe.
Do I have a witness? I have everything. Can you join me and sing it? I have everything.
I have everything.
I needed to confess it. That I have everything.
I have everything.
Somebody personalize it. I have everything.
I have everything.
I needed to say it until you believe it. That I have everything.
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 We trust that God will be gracious to us this morning and equip us with even knowledge that will cause us to excel wherever we find ourselves in the name of Jesus. Father, we say thank you this morning, Lord, as we go into your word, as we learn this morning by your Spirit. Teach us, grant us understanding, and above this, Lord, help us to be doers and not just hearers. In Jesus' name, amen. So, like I promised, we started the conversation around problem solving. And I said that we're going to touch on complex problems. It may be rare that you'll be involved in solving complex problems, but I think the principles can even help you get sharper with solving the basic problems you may encounter in your journey through life. So I'd truly like you to keep your heart open, make your notes. We can't deal with it completely here, but I would probably stir up some thoughts in your heart. And my expectation is that you will go and deepen it if you are really keen on it. When it comes to issues around complex problems, It is very rare for an individual alone to be involved in solving a complex problem. And the areas you encounter complex problems are in areas like medical practice, disaster management, emergency management. You will encounter complex problems in such situations. So I would like to push it, if you don't mind. Our Bible text still remains the same. Job 14:1, we are all adrift in the same boat. Too few days, too many troubles. Too few days, too many troubles. But if you recall, last time we spoke, we agreed that what we call troubles are really in themselves opportunities. Praise the name of the Lord. And we took out of 2 Kings 7:3-5. I'm not going to sweat it this morning, but it's the story of the 4 lepers outside the city of Samaria and the problem they were faced with. It was a problem of potential starvation, and they had to make a decision as to whether they live or die. One thing I want to extract as I stand here before you this morning is the fact that they didn't pray all through, they acted. Hello? They did not do what? Pray all through. They did what? They acted. Where many people get it wrong is we're praying and expecting for God to act when God has given you capacity to act. No matter how deft a prayer warrior you are, you can't pray God into brushing your teeth for you. If you want your mouth to smell fresh, you need to stand up, take your toothbrush, put your toothpaste on it, and brush your teeth. God will supply strength, right, that enables you to do the action. God will supply a functional mind that helps you not to begin to brush your nose. But you will have to brush your own teeth. By the same token, when you are confronted with issues, whilst you pray, please pray the right prayers. You can pray for wisdom, you can pray for strength, you can pray for insight, but God will not by himself come to solve that problem for you. Amen? There are miracles that God's sovereignty alone will execute. I'm sick in my body, and the doctors have said they don't have a solution for me. I can go to God in prayer, right? And God can grant me healing. Praise the name of the Lord. So what are complex problems? Let's start from there. What are complex problems? Complex problems are those that require the ability to approach them from multiple and sometimes competing perspectives. And each perspective may have its own solution to the same problem. So it's multiple perspectives, multiple solution, all competing. And so the question is, which of these multiple solutions is the one that will address the issue? Complex problems are also dynamic. They are not static issues. And when they first appear, they look chaotic and they seem intractable. In other words, they look like you can't find traction with them. They look like they cannot be resolved. That's a complex problem. A patient shows up at a hospital. He has a brain tumor. We all know the sensitivity of the brain. Invading the brain may leave the guy a vegetable for life. There are different things that can bring that guy out of that situation. Even if you have a neurosurgeon, he's not going to function alone in that place. And you may have multiple neurosurgeons looking at this matter, and each of them may have their solution to that same problem. All the solutions may potentially seem correct, but they are competing for which is the best way forward. Chaotic, look like you can't handle. And that word dynamic there is very important. Let me give you a simple example. There is been offshore Nigeria a massive oil spill. Maybe an FPSO has just lost its capacity to hold its content and leaked out all the oil. Multiple variables. Where will the oil land? Can we stop it before it lands? And if it lands, what are the impacts? Environmentalists are shouting, oh, there are sensitive ecosystems at risk. Oh, there are sensitive animals at risk. Oh, there are sensitive facilities at risk. What do you do? These are all competing things, and it appears chaotic. It's a complex problem and requires some dealing to solve. I'll still give a few definitions. Complex problems, situations that are complex, have many different parts, and therefore often difficult to understand. They are complex, there are many parts to them, and difficult to understand. A simple example. You know that doing mechanical work, like being a mechanic, is not a complex problem. It's a complicated problem. So there's a difference between complex and what? Complicated. And we'll touch on that. But how can a new product penetrate a market where old products already are established and are strong? It's a complex problem. Straightforward as it may look to you, it is a complex problem. How do we? Because you can't predict the response of people. If there is one thing you cannot do, is predict people's response. I learned that the very hard way as a person. I started out a business almost 30 years ago in Port Harcourt here. Now it was 1994. It's not almost 30 years. That's 28 good years ago. And the business was refuse management for people in their homes. So I went out in my naivety and innocence. My target was GRA. Because in my heart, those who stay in GRA are, one, responsible people. Two, financially strong. And I don't think those projections were wrong. So the intention was start from GRA, build strength, build financial muscle, and then spread into the rest of Port Harcourt as God will allow us. So when the GRA, we marketed them. We came with very big refuse bins, with garbage bags, and the deal was every Saturday we come, grab your garbage bag, replace your garbage bag, and you pay us 150 naira only. Is that plenty of money? How much? 150 naira only. And then we started. Then the people in GRA, you have serviced them, and they are screaming at you for not offering them, that the place was full since the day before yesterday, as if you were the one that filled the place, right? Okay, we've come to collect the pay now. Oga has not given me money. Some owed us for 5 months, 150 naira only. That's a complex problem. How can you, for the life of me, look at somebody who has 6 cars parked in their compound and not willing to pay 150 naira? It's strange. But the business collapsed on the back of that, because I kept using my salary to try and sustain the business, because I will have to get a tipper, right? To go from place to place to collect the garbage. I have to pay the River State Environmental, whatever, to use their dump site and all of that. I have to pay the laborers who were out there doing it, and they were refusing to pay. It's a complex problem. Just like Nigeria. It's complex. If you think Nigeria is not complex, just take the role in your family of chairman of the family and try to make some changes in the family and see what will happen with you. You and your siblings, just and see what will happen there. So human beings are complex, right? Complex problems are intricate in nature, with many of them seemingly unpredictable. And sorry, with many unpredictable and interacting, moving parts. It's not just that it's interacting, it's moving. That's why we say it's not static, it's dynamic. They all are interacting, but you can't hold it and say this is where it will stay. It is changing. A simple example is the COVID virus, right? As they are making a vaccine, the virus is what? Mutating. It is changing. And they have to keep chasing the virus as it's changing. That's a complex problem. Complex problem. It's not that the scientists don't know how and what to do, but the virus is not staying in one place. Besides the fact that the virus is not staying in one place, people are social in their nature. That's how God made and wired human beings. And that's why God says it is not good for man to be alone. So we have to interact, we have to socialize. But in socializing, we stand the risk of transmitting the virus and continuing to get like wildfire in our communities. So that's what complex problems are. Simple problems are generally like straight line problems, linear. Those 4 lepers. We are hungry. There is no food around. What do we do? Is that complex? It's not complex. Just this, that, and we go grab our food and life continues. Please stay with me, bros. J. Neduman says, unearthing a complex problem is better planted by earthing the complete root cause. In other words, if you want to solve a complex problem, the first thing you must try to do is understand the root cause of the problem. So he says if you want to unearth it, better you plant the root cause. In other words, better you establish the root cause of that problem. In a number of cases, when people are confronted with complex problems, they go for the symptom of the problem. How many of us have ridden a lift before? And in the lift where you are standing, there's a TV screen. Who has ridden a lift like that before? That TV screen you see there was actually solution to a complex problem. In a high-rise building in America, quite a number of years ago, not just an ordinary high-rise made up of the who is who in society. Residents were complaining bitterly that the lifts are too slow. And they were all threatening to move out of the building because the lifts, by their opinion, were too slow. You know, it's one thing to go to the 7th floor of a building in a lift. It's another thing to go to the 100th floor. I don't know if I'm making sense to you. And so, all kinds of proposals came to the table, how they are going to deal with the issue. Get faster lift, this, that. Get more lifts so that the stops at different floors will be reduced, if you get what I'm saying. If you have 2 lifts running as opposed to 4 lifts running, it's better to have 4 because at least we can spread out across the 4. Each of the proposed solutions will cost a lot of money. No guarantee people won't complain. And a company came with a simple solution, and they said the reason they are complaining is that they are bored in the lift. Put something to keep their mind off the time the complaints will die. And they put TV screens in the lift. So when you enter, you are looking at TV. Whether it's 10 minutes, you don't know. Am I making sense to you? Simple solution, but it delivered the value that was required. What am I trying to say to you? You know, sometimes when we face problems, the first thing you go to is, I don't have money to solve the problem. Hello. It may not be money. Have you thought through the problem? Sometimes a phone call or two can solve your problem. Or talking to the right person can solve your problem. Who has been in a place where you didn't have money to buy what you wanted, but you knew somebody who could give it to you? Did your problem get solved? Did you spend money? No. And that's the power of trying to unearth the root cause. The people who provided a solution about putting a screen in the lift, all they did was get to the root cause. People are bored. Keep their minds busy. They won't know when time flew. If you've been in traffic before and there's nothing to do, you can get irritable in the traffic. Am I correct? That's when you start fighting for road, as though you are going to save anything like more than 1 minute. But if you are listening to maybe a song or music you particularly enjoy, or you are listening to somebody speaking things you want to hear, you don't even know whether time is going or burning or not. Am I correct? You have solved the problem of anxiety by simply doing that. All right? So, complex versus complicated problems. I like to look at the difference. Complicated problems have straight line, step-by-step solutions that can be implemented by experts with the necessary skill and experience. It is complicated. A simple example. Every car you drive, by virtue of people who build cars, they say they have over 60,000 individual parts that make up a car. Over 60,000. And all the parts are interacting for that car to function and function effectively. That is complicated because to build that car, you're going to have to put these 60,000 parts together in such a manner that their interactions produce the desired results. But if you have experts, you can actually put a design. I mean, if you go to car manufacturing yards, they have their manufacturing lines. Am I correct? At this point, they fit this. It rolls to the next point. They fit that. It rolls to and at the end of that production line, a car drives out. Because somebody has put a straight line process that delivers the building of the car. And when you take that same car to a technician to fix it, he has his diagnostic tools, right? He plugs it, says, okay, the problem is that the catalytic converter is no longer functioning. What does it do? Goes straight to the catalytic converter, takes it out, replaces it, and your car comes back alive. It's a complicated problem, but it can be solved by step-by-step straight line processes, right? A complex problem, on the other hand, they are often confounding without a clear straight line path to a solution. And you can only know that you have found an effective strategy once it works. Let's do a very simple example trying to understand these two concepts. Building a house is a complicated problem. Am I correct? Because you need to know. There's a brother that came to me in church here and said, I am a mason. I want to learn how to read drawings so that I improve my services. Can you introduce me to any person in church who is a civil engineer and a builder, so he will teach me how? That's a mason who is going somewhere, whether you believe it or you don't believe it, right? So, the architect does the drawing. If I give you that drawing to build your house by yourself, by the time I come back, your roof will be at the bottom. Why? Because you don't fully understand the process. But it's complicated. However, once the architect finishes, the building engineer comes to site, he reads the drawing, he looks at the plot of land available, he positions the house in such a manner that he meets the government. That's actually ideal, right? Ideal. Because the government, by the law of Nigeria, says you cannot occupy more than 60% of the land space with a facility you are building. That's the law of Nigeria. But people occupy 110% and build into the main road. Who has seen that before? And then they can't park their car. They now park the car on the road. Well, the building engineer comes and he lays it out and back. You just see masons doing their thing, see people carrying concrete, and you come back in 1 month time, something is standing there. Am I correct? That's a complicated problem. A complex problem is building a relationship with your neighbor. Whether you believe it or not, it's a complex problem. Do you know what they like? You can come out and ask my neighbor, good morning. Who told you the morning is good? It's a complex problem. And you can only know you succeeded at the end if there is a relationship. Nobody can draw a straight line to say this is how you build a relationship with neighbor. There are a few tips, right? Be patient, be humble, be trustworthy, have integrity, be honest. These are all tips. Now you can be straightforward with your neighbor. Neighbor, that your generator last night, no let us sleep. Oh. Is that being straightforward? Some neighbor will say, oh, I'm sorry about that, and try to do something about it. Some other neighbor will say, in the jealous or sin no get generator. Come on, talk to me, somebody. It is complex. And so for such situations, you only know you have succeeded when you arrive at the point where there is now a warm relationship. And if somebody asks you, how did you do it? You can't really explain. And if you move out of that house into another house, what you did with this neighbor may not work with the next neighbor. That's why it's complex. Praise the name of the Lord. So you see that building a house is what? Complicated. Building a good relationship with the neighbor is complex. Now, if they asked you on a normal day, which is complex, you will say building a house. That's the honest truth. Many of us will say building a house. But complex is because there's no straight line to the solution. And sometimes you and your wife are brainstorming. The way our neighbor entered our house this evening, looks like something is offending him. Well, let me go and ask your wife. Say, no, don't go. Don't go. Wait for 1 week first. And you wait for 1 week. Neighbor will come out tomorrow and say, you saw me yesterday. You didn't tell me anything. It is complex. Praise God. So let's now take a look at it, get into the meat of it. Right? Complex versus simple problem solving. It's really important to establish the difference. And I've said here that the key difference between complex problems and simple problem solving is the amount and the kinds of consideration that you must acknowledge. When you are solving simple problems, your considerations are few. But when you're solving complex problems, it has many moving parts. And because it has many moving parts, there are so many things you begin to factor in to solve a complex problem. I have been involved in emergency response. For the first 10 years of my life, what I did for a living, of my work life, what I did for a living was emergency response management. And I can tell you that you can't say this is how we go. It was oil spill cleanup. You get into the swamps of the Delta, there's been a spill. In the Delta, you have tidal waters, right? The tide will swell and tide will ebb. With the swell, oil is pushed into the creeks. And with the ebb, ideally, it should flow out of the creeks. But what you cannot determine is the creeklet out of which it will flow when it's ebbing. Am I making sense to somebody? And by science, you can't enter the creek to begin to clean up the oil because you will mess up the ecosystem there and probably cause more damage. And by the way, when oil touches the breathing roots of the mangrove, they just look like fire burnt them. Who has seen that before in the Niger Delta? Okay, so I have a hand up. Go into the Niger Delta of Nigeria, you will weep. You will see mangrove trees that just look like they were burnt by fire. They weren't burnt. The oil just, with swelling tide, rubbed off. You know, creeks, the mangrove have the roots that come out above water. They breathe. That's why they are there. And so once the oil smears it, it's suffocated. Can't breathe anymore. So it dries up. How do I manage that without destroying the ecosystem? How do I make sure that the oil, when it comes out here, is going to still return from here? By what time will it return? So back in the day, you are doing calculations. It takes 6 hours for tide to change, for those who understand the marine space, right? But the fact that tide has changed in the Atlantic does not mean it will hit Bonny at that same time. So you have, how many hours will it get to Bonny? The effect of the pull from the ocean. Okay, it's going to be there by 12 midnight. I will be sleeping. We can't do anything. So it's complex because there are many variables to it. So let's look at simple problems. These are the considerations generally for simple problems. We've dealt with them last time. What is the scope of the problem? Basically, trying to define how large or how small this problem is. What resources do I have at my disposal? That's also a consideration. I mean, you cannot, for the life of me, you have 100,000 in your bank account and you are planning to solve a 10 million naira problem. You must ask yourself what resources you have at your disposal. What are the potential solutions? Remember, we dealt with it the last time we spoke. What are the options available? Then we evaluate the options to get the optimal solution, which we go ahead and implement. Who recalls those 4 steps with simple problem solving? Define the problem, identify your options, evaluate your options, implement your preferred option. So these are the considerations for simple problems. Let's look at some considerations for complex. These are not all, but I just pulled this out. Scope of problem is the same. But now you are looking at the impact of that problem. Because with simple problems, the impact is straight to see. But with a complex problem, it's not as straight to see as you think. There may be areas you did not consider. That's where you have your heaviest impact from that situation. You begin to ask yourself for resource availability. Then you're asking yourself, what are the potential changes that can occur? Remember, we said complex problems are dynamic. They are not static. What could change? How will it change? When will it change? We in Nigeria today, as we're speaking, there are products in the market that have been there for years. They did not pull through, right? But some products get into the market and bang on, they are there. Why? They understood changing times, changing seasons. If you look at now, if you come to Nigeria, there are a lot of fintech institutions, right? And they have products in the market. If you ask me to use cheaper, I don't know what to do with it. I have to go to First Bank. But the young people, where do they want to go? Cheaper. And any man doing a product now targeting 60-year-old men is wasting his time. Hello? If you are doing a product, it has to target the young people, and it must appeal to them. So these are changing situations. Potential solutions. There are many. Recall we said they are competing. Many possible competing solutions. What are the optimal solutions? It's not just enough to say optimal. You ask yourself, how effective would this solution be? Beyond effectiveness, what is the downside of this solution? Because, those days when HIV/AIDS was ravaging, when it first was discovered, I was in the university at that time. And I studied virology as one of the courses. And in virology, we were made to understand that once the temperature of a system gets to 60 degrees centigrade, no virus can survive because viruses are proteins. And at 60 degrees centigrade, proteins get denatured and they go. Am I making sense to you? Then we say, why don't you elevate the temperature of man to 16? You also kill the man because you denature him. But that's a simple solution, right? We can go on and on. There are some things troubling you. If you just drink bleach, those things will die. But if you drink bleach too, as they are dying, you are dying with them. And so when you see them doing drugs, they don't just make drugs. We have a pharmacist in the house, Ticc. The considerations are many. Can this drug go straight to this organism we are targeting without affecting the host? So you find drugs that go to interfere with the reproduction of that particular organism. We can go on and on, stop their metabolism while the cells of the body still continue to live. So you are asking yourself, what are the impacts of the options I have on the table, both positive and negative? How can I implement my solution? And very importantly, how do I measure success? Recall we said, when you are building a relationship with your neighbor, it's whether the relationship is whether you succeeded in solving that problem. So you have to measure success. So for you, what is the measure of success in your relationship with your neighbor? Is it that they are now allowing you come to their house to eat fufu? Or that you guys can now watch movies together? There must be something that you measure to say, we have succeeded. And once you know the measure of success, it helps you tomorrow when you're confronted with a similar problem, you keep getting better at it. Ask people who solve complex problems. As they grow with the process, they get better at what they do. Okay, so now let's look at other factors with regards to complex versus simple problems. I said we have considerations, we've looked at them, then there's predictions. When solving complex problems, it's important to anticipate potential changes. Because we said it's dynamic. What can change? And then you need to ask yourself, the strategy you are deploying, how can your strategy change to accommodate the changing situation? In other words, with complex problems, you cannot be fixated with your solution. You must be nimble, you must be flexible, and you must be anticipatory. You can't just say, this is the way, and we go. And that is where a lot of people get stuck. It is the fear of having to lose control and accepting flexibility that makes them paralyzed in the face of complex problems. But if you are willing to fail, you are willing to learn with your failure, you will not be afraid to tackle complex problems. When you make plans for complex problems, you must give yourself room for changes. And therefore, you must be alert, watching out for the beginning of the change. And when it starts changing, what do? You change with it. And that is why if you see where they are managing an emergency, you could find a room or like a building filled with 200 people, all managing one same emergency. Because different people are throwing their input into the room and trying to support decision making. Because when you are managing an emergency, there must be somebody in command of that management. Am I making sense? But that person doesn't have all the answers to all the questions. So you have people who are legal, you have people who understand community liaison, you have people who understand environmental pressures, safety pressures, you have people who are doing the actual execution, those who are planning, and all of them are funneling information to the commander. Why are they doing that? so that he makes the best decision at every point in time. And they may have decided to go in this direction. None of us controls weather, and the weather chooses to change at that material time. What happens to you? You must change with the weather to keep on managing that situation. And the only time you can say you succeeded is if the goals you set from the beginning have been achieved. Am I making sense? It's difficult to measure success in the middle of managing a complex problem. In many cases, it's at the end you know, and that's why it's called complex. Then the other part is the intricacy of the problem. That's another factor that separates complex from simple problems. Intricacy of the problem. Complex problem solving often involves assessing and evaluating potential solutions for problems that have several variables and intricacies. It's not straightforward. It's not the way you solve ordinary problems. It can throw some shocks at you. So I'm going to take us through a few steps for handling complex problems. But that doesn't mean you should report to the office and tell your MD, I'm now an expert at solving complex. You know, many years ago, I sent a guy to learn plumbing from the church, just trying to help him find his footing in life. He started learning plumbing. After 2 weeks, he came to me. No, he came to one of the elders in church and said, maybe Elder Odongo, please, do you know any person building houses in church that he wants to do their plumbing? If you go and do that with your MD, you will put the whole company in problem. Are we together? So step one, identify the problem and its cause. You want to solve complex problems? That's the first step. Identify the problem and identify the cause of the problem. Recall we said you need to unearth the root cause. Did you say that? We need to understand the root cause so that you do not go ahead and begin to apply solution to a problem you don't fully understand. Number two, consider the impacts of the problem, because the impact of the problem will drive the solution you proffer. If you don't fully understand the consequences a problem will create, your solution may be lopsided. Are we together? So you must consider the impact of that problem, how it affects you, how it affects those who are exposed, how it affects those who are in the line of its impact. If there's a fire raging now, it's not just the house on fire that is threatened. Am I correct? Every house in that neighborhood can go up in that same fire if we do not resolve. And even firefighting, you will understand, and it's part of emergency management. You don't just jump into firefighting. You must do your assessment and ask yourself what's best to do here. Sometimes you see firemen, a fire is raging. They leave the fire and you see them spraying their water on something else. Why? They are trying to make sure that this one doesn't catch fire too. Am I making sense? Because they know if this catches fire, it's over. So they are cooling this system, making sure that it's not enough to carry the heat to transfer the fire. You say, what are they doing? Are they crazy? They are not crazy. They know what they are doing. They've done their assessment, and they need to cool that structure so that the fire here doesn't cross. Because if it crosses, all of us are in a situation. Am I making sense to you? And that's what it means to consider the problem and the impacts of the problem. Yes. Number three, brainstorm solution. In a simple problem, you can solve it all by yourself, no third party support or contribution. But it is rare and nearly impossible to solve a complex problem and to act alone. There is room for brainstorming. Recently, in my organization, we had a major exercise. It was just a test, a drill to test our readiness to handle such exposures. And I happened to be a deputy commander for that particular incident. It was all make-believe, but at a point I began to feel the tension. Because you had to make decisions based on information you are not too sure whether the man bringing information is correct. I don't know if I'm making sense. So there's a room for brainstorming. People are talking, people are challenging, people are asking questions, people are saying, no, I don't accept this, I don't agree with that. It's all competing solution. But as a person who makes a decision, you need to be disciplined in your listening and hear what they are not saying. I hope you know you can be in a room, people are talking, and the things they are not saying is more important than the things they are saying. So you must listen out for the things they are not saying and maybe tease it out of them. I saw you shake your head. So what? There's something you want to say. Please talk to me. And that person may just say something that nullifies what you thought was correct. Hello? So there's room for what? Brainstorming in solving complex problems, because it's in the place of brainstorming. I just shared an example of buildings high-rise with elevators, yeah? It was brainstorming that led to the solution. I hope you know that. Serious brainstorming and reducing the problem to the very basics and fundamentals of it. Until you strip it down, you may not be able to solve it, to be honest. Building a relationship with my neighbor. The first thing is emotional intelligence, right? That's the basic building block for building a relationship. So you need to know what your neighbor is like. Is the person bossy? Is the person humble? Does the person like the truth? There are people who don't like the truth. Hello? They hate the truth. But just tell them lies, they are happy. They know it's a lie. Especially ladies. I'm being honest. It's just the way ladies are wired. You know this man will not marry you. You know. In your heart, you know. He says, I will marry you. And you are happy. Does it happen? And he says, well, you have to sleep with me first before I marry you. Say, okay now. But you know he will not marry. It's a bit strange, you know. But does it happen? It does happen. Yesterday I was talking with them here and I said, the pastor said, people like to be deceived. And it is the honest truth. As we're in this church now, if I'm deceiving people, this church will be fuller than this. I guarantee you that. There's a guy in Anambra State. Is the place full? Do they know he's deceiving them? Do they know? They know. They know. But they just like to be deceived. I said it here, if I just come to church, charge Jehovah. And I follow Mrs. Udongo, and I now prophesy. And in the course of prophecy, I said, God said, bring 50,000 now. She will hurriedly bring it. It's just our nature. It makes you feel good to be deceived. Ask people who fall in love. They know it's deception. Come on, talk to me now. Am I making sense to you? When they find a relationship that will lead somewhere, because the person is very straight and not deceiving, it's not exciting. But life can be simple. And the simpler it is, the better for you. People have met others and they know this lady is up to no good in my life. What do? They still flow. Say, my love will cover for two of us. Okay. I've been there, so don't think I'm telling you theory. My love is enough for all of us. When push turns to shove, you will know your love is not enough. It's more than that. So people, please, choose not to be deceived. and choose not to embrace deceit. Just be true to yourself. And you won't hurt too many times. Amen. There's one new program now. If you put 10,000 in 3 months, they give you 500,000. What will happen? What happens? All of us go there. When those people along Elios were doing their thing, I called one of my people. I said, take your money out. I went there with him. An institution where they collect my money, they use bouncer to push me back. It just tells you there's something wrong here. And whatever they are doing, why are banks not doing it? You think banks want to fail? Hello. But were many of us caught? Huh? Answer me now. Okay. Many of us were caught too. Me too, I was caught some. So if you think it's only you, all of us were. Hello. Yes, you did your projections, you did your permutations, but the people, they were ahead. Whoever saw that video, a guy, he got something, he put it, and more came out. And he put more, and more came out. Then he gathered everything he had, and he put it, and the door closed. Even as you are doing it, you know they can run at any time. But your greed has the better of you. Praise the name of the Lord. So please, before you make decisions, especially when you are not too sure, look for people with good heads, brainstorm with them. You can actually, especially those you think they are not risk takers, they are gifted with the ability to identify and expose risks for you. And if you are a risk taker, you get frustrated when they are telling you about all the pitfalls they see. Who's been there? I'm a risk taker. That's me. Total risk taker. But my wife, very risk averse. So she would look at it and tell you, this one, mba, this one, this one. So which one will we do? But if you sit back and look at it critically, she's correct. And so you can still take a risk, but you know what you are walking into, and you hedge yourself against massive failures. Is that possible? Okay, let's go. Step number 4, consider impacts. Right? And choose best solution. Impact here is not the impact of the problem. It's the impact of your solution. How will your solution change what's going on? You must put it in consideration. And once you have considered the impact of action you will take, at that point, you can choose the best solution. I mean, if you've been, many have been to the lab, but they don't know what they do with their samples. If the doctor is suspecting this particular infection or that particular infection, or they've nailed down the infection, for example, and they want to give you the most potent medication for that particular infection, they take your sample and culture that agent of disease in the culture medium where they introduce antibiotics. So the antibiotic, for example, can be on a small strip of paper. As they are culturing the organism, they drop the antibiotic in it. And if you look at the culture when it has grown, there is normally a sterile zone around the antibiotic. And the antibiotic that has the largest sterile zone clearly is the most potent against that infection. Am I making sense? Brother G is shaking his. Am I speaking your language? You should give me an award. You know, it's the most potent, and then they say, okay, take this drug in combination with that drug. Because the two drugs may have different modes of acting, and they also know that this organism can mutate. So when they attack it two-pronged, the organism has no room for survival. Are we together? Some people say, I used to take Lonat, it doesn't work for me anymore. I heard that's one of the malaria medicines, right? So those days when we were taking malaria medicine, if you know what, go and take quinine. Good old quinine. Malaria doesn't stand it to you today. It's very bitter. Praise the name of the Lord. And step 5 is implement your solution. And do what? Prepare for changes. Remember we said complex problems are dynamic. So as you're implementing, don't conclude, I have my solution in hand. Prepare for changes, because as it's changing, you need to also change what you are doing with it until you land the result you want. I think I'm going to stop it with these final words. Time is already up. Before deciding you will solve a significant problem, you must first recognize what kind of problem it is. Complex or complicated. It's good to be clear, because complicated problems are straight line solution. Complex problems are not straight line solution. For complex problems, you need a we approach, not I. That's why I said you have a team around you that engages the right people in co-creating a solution that they know will work. And successful complex problem solving starts with making the distinction between complicated, complex, and simple, and then choosing your approach in line with what you have identified. With that, I'll stop here. We can take questions today. Next Sunday is Alone with God. There will be no lead. I also want to encourage you to be here over the next weekend between the hours of Friday to Sunday. Friday is by 5 p.m. Saturday is 7 a.m. Sunday is 7 a.m. in the morning. And you'll be blessed, I'm sure. Then by the last weekend of this month, which is the weekend of the 31st, I think, we will be handling questions and answers on complex problem solving. I hope it's been a good ride for you. If it's been a good ride, can you celebrate the Lord, who is the author of wisdom? So we get into service.